What's up, everybody? This is the Jedi. I wanted to produce this video a lot earlier today, but alas, that was not the will of the Creator. And so, while it may not be on time, it's definitely timely. In previous work that I've done in previous years on my other channel that was shut down by this devil, I had spoken at different times at length in different pieces about Dr. King. And there, at times I celebrated him, at times I was very critical of him. And at other times I pointed out so specifically how particularly when it came to the I Have a Dream speech, we only get the last page and a half of a 6-page speech. And while I slept in most of the day, I did watch various, festivities and so forth that were going on around the country, and talk shows and so forth. And once again, all they play is that last cadence at the end. They don't play the entire speech, which was an indictment of this asshole of the devil. They don't do that. I'm also struck by how many white people or forget that, in a white country that now fakes this love for Dr. King and quotes him and all of that, they try to cling so desperately and artificially to this this position that serves their need to, as usual, ignore any culpability, any inheritance, any responsibility. They only want to cling to, he would want us all to be together, and and look how far we've come, and all of this. And I'm sick of that statement too, because as I always tell you, yesterday is today and today is yesterday, and not a damn thing has changed. We as Africans need to be clear about that. You've got an old car sitting in the yard. Weeds and everything have grown up around it. The engine is rusted and blown. Head gaskets and everything. But you go out and you put new upholstery in it and a new paint job and ah-ha-ha, but the damn thing still don't run. Is that progress? You see, it's how you define it. And I always tell you that this society is very crafty and very talented with their stagecraft. Staging, illusions, smoke and mirrors, And too many of our people buy that. I'm here to once again ring the bell, to push back, you understand, to blow away the smoke and to break the mirrors, and remind you once again that nothing has changed and we have moved nowhere. Because what represents the rusted, blown out engine in this society for us is the structural, institutional shit. You understand? The greatest coup ever pulled off, and the thing that testifies to what I'm saying, this rusted engine, is the election of Barack Obama and our glorious angel, Michelle. You understand? Because as badly as that should have been a step forward, a real step forward for Africans, where we at least now begin to take that old engine out of the car, it did nothing but at least just sort of raise the hood and then close it back down. Because the institutions and the structures are fixed in place. And as Malcolm said, and I'm paraphrasing, you've got to get rid of everything. Everything old has got to go. And what they have installed is legacy. Legacy. So you have people in, not just in politics and in Congress and all of that, and up on Capitol Hill, those are gatekeepers, but in all the major industry, you understand? In industry and in finance and in banks and business, companies, how they even use the pathology of starting out with our children from very young ages. Your kid can just be riding their bike and they're pulled over by the cops and documented, you see, and then later on or even then given some sort of a small infraction that makes them a target of the system. But at all costs, let's put some kind of record on them. And over the years, we've seen them attach that to employment and everything else. It is still a system of slavery and oppression while giving you the illusion of freedom. That's what it is. An illusion. This same satanic nation that claims to love Dr. King so much now is the very nation that killed him. It's the same nation that on the same day they would fake celebrating and remembering Dr. King would still call Black Lives Matter a terrorist organization. This is not a people who love peace. Do you understand? In fact, the very word peace is like throwing garlic and holy water at a vampire. You understand? It repels them. Evil is their lifeblood. We have to be clear about that. And one or two out marching in protest with African people or saying the right things on television or in a YouTube video does not a people represent. Do you understand? I always tell you, you have to know your enemy, your environment, and your condition. And so I come now, after all the celebration and the hoopla, and the little kids getting on stage with the little boys with the tie that's too big for them and the shirt that they hadn't learned how to iron yet, and they're reciting the last page and a half of the I Have a Dream speech. And any of our people who dared to have some sort of a warm feeling over this, I also invite you to go, after you watch this video, and listen to the lyrics of Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday. That was an indictment, a calling out of this devilish ass nation over the pushback of not wanting a holiday to celebrate this man's life. You see, there was much objection to a holiday for Dr. King. You need to let your children know that. And you need to educate yourself if you didn't know it. This was not welcomed with open arms. Please understand. You understand? You still live in a nation where they come out by the thousands for a racist Civil War statue. Same devil. Same devil. Nothing has changed. Nothing. Nothing. And it's important that you fill your mind and your eyes with the images of lynchings and sit-ins and the Little Rock 9 and images like that, where you see the thousands of white ass fucking devils out there. Not just one or two. It was all of them. All of them. And so in 2018, we're just supposed to just trust any one of them that comes up to our face with some fake grin, or because they're your neighbor next door, or think that we've made some sort of progress just because you can ride on the bus and sit wherever you want. Nothing has changed. Nothing. And I heard a very great statement somewhere along the way today, where somebody said that the election of Obama pissed white people off so much because here finally he represented everything that they claim they want to be on paper. He represented it all. But it came in a black face, and that was too much for them. Too much. Too much. And let us remind ourselves that when we hear talk of the country being divided now, and you'll hear people say, well, with the climate in the country right now and things like that, ignore that. I caution and encourage you to ignore that. Because it's just white folks that are pissed off. That's it. All the rest of us need to watch with a vigilant eye. But just with a vigilant eye. Because they're the only ones pulling their hair out. You see? Because they wanted to go in the opposite direction. Anything that Obama did, they don't want anything to do with it. Greatest thing that ever happened. The greatest thing. The greatest thing that ever happened. And at the same time, that almost happened. Because if it was not for their white fragility and their sixth sense of inferiority, which is appropriate, and their depraved lack of vision and humanity, Obama could have done great things. He could have done great things. We need to be aware of what we're dealing with. We need to be very aware. So, Dr. King is ours. And I don't agree with what Dr. King did, but I respect that what he did, he was doing it because he thought it was the right thing to do at the time that he did it. But we have hindsight, and we can say that everything he did was exactly the wrong thing. Because while every other culture, when given a chance, they chose to separate from this devil, we chose to get into the bathtub with this beast. And to this day, we measure our success by whether or not we're accepted into their fold. Oscar's so white, you see? And all these sorts of things. Or whether or not one of ours can be on the cover of their Vogue magazine and all of it. Segregation is the greatest thing that happened to us. And if given my choice, in my perfect world, segregation would be again now. Because the only way we as a people are ever going to rise is we have to be completely separate from these people. Because as long as we are integrated with them, they will continue to have a close access to us and sabotage every fucking thing that we do to be independent. We need our own land. We need our own banks primarily to be able to fund our own economic structure, our projects, our development, our schools, hospitals, libraries, homes, everything that you have in a society, much like the Black Wall Street of Greenwood, Oklahoma, 1921. Yes, I say segregation now, and I would help to put the signs up. Because their greatest nightmare is the liberation of African people. We see now they're laying the groundwork to eventually declare anyone who's interracial to be some new race. That's where it's going. That's why every single fucking television show, every single commercial, doesn't matter what the product or what they're doing, all the shit is fucking somebody black with somebody white. Not with somebody Indian or Asian or Arab or anything else on the earth. Gotta be black and white. So desperate are they now, because their numbers have dwindled, and they've continued to hold up this lie about our population numbers in the country. When Malcolm was on the earth, he was talking about us being 13 and 14% of the population. How is it that in 2018 we're still that same fucking number when our women are far more fertile than any white heifer? They're lying. We also know that they require other immigrants that come here now to just declare themselves white in order to balloon their numbers. You see, that's why you see in the boxes, you'll see a selection for non-white Hispanic. You see, and things like that. One of my sisters works for Section 8, and she tells me even how they come in, and you even have Arabs, Latinos, and every kind of other fucking people, and they have white as their identification, and that's what they mark on the fucking forms. And they're so not white. We're dealing with a diabolical system, and we can't be bothered by those who want to claim that, well, I didn't do it and I'm not part of it. They have to take responsibility if they want to show themselves to be sincere. Words mean nothing to us. Do you understand? Words mean nothing. We must see action, and indeed we demand it. Because we're not going to, as I've said many times, we're not going to play the shell game of, well, which one's the good one? Which one's the good one? You understand? We get a blanket for all of us that we're all one thing. And so what's good for the goose shall be good for the gander. And so we paint them all with the same damn brush. Because how is it that in this society, every single one of us as individuals always has to go out and prove. You got to have one voice for fucking your family and friends, and one for their white ass and all the bullshit. You got to prove, and you got to dress a certain way, and you got to do this, and you got to do that, and your hair can't be threatening, and you can't do this, and you can't wear a do-rag, and ha ha ha. Well, it's only natural to give back to anyone what they give to you. I always say, do unto others as they do unto you, and they don't do the shit no more. Feel me. Feel me. I also want to apologize for not being on camera for this, but I don't think I need to be because it just gets in the way of the information. And the information is always, always the most important thing in anything that I'm communicating. The information is always my provocation for presenting any production to you. That's it. It's not about the Jedi. It's not about me. It's about the information. It's about us. So in this piece, I am going to begin probably a 3-part series on race. And this will be the first part of it. And in this production, I intend to take you through the I Have a Dream speech. And then I elected to do this one first because it's shorter than the mountaintop speech. But we're going through the mountaintop speech. Oh, we're doing it. We're doing it. Because that one's longer than this one. But it's very important to have a more textualized and in-depth understanding of what Dr. King's words were, and to have sort of a view into his intention and what was really in his heart and what were his feelings and emotions, and not just sound bites from this white devil on their fucking fake ass media. We're over that. I should also share with you that on the day of Dr. King's birthday, fake ass, orange fucking, fucked up ass, fake ass Trump decided to go play golf. That's how he paid homage to African people and Dr. King. We're not surprised. And I just am really sharing that with you gratuitously, because we really don't give a fuck. We really don't. And we're definitely not surprised. Let us be clear. So, also by doing it this way, this allows you that if at the end of the I Have a Dream speech, if you don't want to go into the mountaintop speech, you can just watch it later or whatever. But I expect anyone, certainly anyone who's subscribed to my channel, to consume all the information that I put out in your own time, but you consume everything that I put out. Because I'm not here for entertainment. I'm not here for money. I'm not here for popularity and bragging rights and all of that. I'm a serious communicator. And I'm very deliberate about what I present to the audience that listens to me. Every single video should be a teaching moment for you. You should leave that confirmed in knowledge that you already know, and educated about something that you didn't know. That I expect and demand for you to then use that in the fabric of your everyday life. Let it infect and affect your thinking and your actions. If you can't do that, do not listen to me. Do not listen to me. Do not. Do not. Now, let us get into this first speech. I Have a Dream. It begins. I'm happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 5 score years ago, a great American, in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. He's referring to fake-ass Lincoln. This momentous decree is a great beacon, light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still badly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. I must stop there. That's always been a very important sentence to me. I want to really break that down for you as I lose my place. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty, talking about how you're separate from the economic structure. Do you understand? Economically, as a people collectively, we have the 9th largest economy on the fucking earth. Do you know this? Do you know this? If we were a country, we'd have the 9th largest fucking economy on this bitch. But he says that we are on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. Now, that's in this nation and in Africa. Because this is supposed to be the richest nation. But we don't own any industry. We don't own any banks. We don't own anything significant. We don't own water filtration plants. We don't own any electricity. We don't own fucking cable companies. I mean, you could go down the list. We don't own technology companies. Keep going. So here we are on this lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity, even in our own communities. You have our communities, and you got the fucking Vietnamese and the Koreans doing our fucking women's nails and shit. And you got the Arabs owning all the stores and all of it, and the Koreans and the Vietnamese and the Chinese. Again, that lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. Hear this now. 100 years later, the Negro still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. You see, this is where he was disillusioned, because that document was not for us. Do you understand? And at the time that it was authored, we were in chattel slavery. This was not for us. It was not for us. Do you understand? Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. A check which has come back marked insufficient funds. And I say, why wouldn't it? Because they didn't make no check to us. You see? So he was disillusioned, even in his brilliance. This was at the core of what I say was his biggest mistake. Because he thought you could shame this devil into righteousness. You don't shame abject evil. It's impervious to shame. You see, and guilt. And humanity. You understand? You're dealing with the devil. There is no shame. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. Well, we refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us, upon demand, the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off, or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now, I love that because he's saying, you know, it's like when they say, well, not now, or how we think that we can just sit around and wait for another 50, 100, 200 years. We'll eventually get there. We shall overcome. No. If you want shit now, you have to get shit now. Right now. So it's interesting that he says that. He says this is no time for cooling off. And this is no time to engage in the or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Nah. He's encouraging you to do shit now, not gradually. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Well, I would like to interject there and say that, do you understand that nowhere in their fucking Bill of Rights and the Constitution and all the bullshit, and even in their Pledge of Allegiance and their national anthem, the word democracy does not appear anywhere, everybody. It's a fucking republic. Please educate and understand that. You see? So, where do we get this democracy bullshit? Where does that come in? Where does it happen? My throat is so dry. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. See, that was kind of a little low-key threat there. It would be fatal. You see, and remember, he's standing on the National Mall giving this to however many millions of people were out there. He said it would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. Fatal is the word he chose. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. White people need to hear that fucking line right there. Do you understand? Do you understand what I just read, white people? This sweltering summer of Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass. So don't tell us to fucking get over it. 'Cause we're not. We're not. Ever. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality, bitches. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hoped that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. It was prophetic, his words. Prophetic. Prophetic. And to my people I say, this is why it's important to focus on our new generation, our young ones. Do you understand? We must teach them to continue to agitate and upset and aggravate and never let this enemy rest or get comfortable. Ever. Ever. Because that's what they seek. Let's just get over it. Racism's over. Nah. We must never stop. Ever. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundation of our nation until the bright days of justice emerge. And that is something that I must say, to my people who stand on the worn threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. Oh yes, we totally disagree there. You see, because until you hate a thing, you will never destroy it. Hear this. Until you hate a thing, you will never destroy it. And you cannot have love for that that hates you. That is insanity. You must hate that that hates you. And you must destroy that that hates you. But you definitely don't love that that hates you. You see? But he is a Christian. The worst amongst us, I always tell you. The worst and the weakest. That's what comes across their tongue. That's who forgives Dylan Roof after he murders 9 of our people in a house of death in South Carolina. You understand? He's saying, let us not seek to satisfy our thirst of freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. Oh, you need to take a very good gulp of that. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. Well, that's for starters, but we're past that. You see? You can start there. You see? Everything has a pathology, I always tell you. But you can't just keep doing the same shit if you still keep getting the same result. I always tell you, if you want shit you never had before, you've got to do shit you never did before. That is the formula for success on anything in life, on the earth, period. Know that. Know that. We must not allow our creative protest to denigrate into physical violence. We're past that. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to distrust all white people. He's taken a low-key swipe at the Nation of Islam and the Black Panthers and such, you see, because they were and the Deacons of Defense even, because they were saying, fuck that peace bullshit, it's time to take this white devil out. And so he's speaking to them, you see. And you had the Nation of Islam saying the white man is the devil. So he's saying we must not allow, what did he say again? The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to distrust all white people. Well, you don't need the militancy to do that. You see, if you're paying attention, you realize that it's all of they ask that don't like you. You see, for many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And again, that's fine, but that does not make and represent a people. Those are individuals. Do you understand? And there's less of them that show up for any of our shit claiming they come to help us than the sea of their asses that you can see in any of those historical photos that I've cited for you. You see? Train loads would come for lynchings. You understand? It was printed in the newspapers. You see, posters and flyers and all of it. You don't have to go back that far. You can go to then the Little Rock 9. Go and look at the footage of just the National Guard trying to get 9 little black kids into Little Rock High School. And you see the sea of white people in the street. We're not playing the shell game of which one is good and which one is bad. You understand? When you see rattlesnakes, you don't go, well, they all can't be bad. Wherever you see a rattlesnake, I don't care if you're in Timbuktu, or if you're in Arizona, or if you're in New York, or if you're in California, or if you're in fucking Hawaii, or Alaska, or you're in Florida, a rattlesnake is a fucking rattlesnake, and nobody makes any distinction between them. Hear me. They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. Yes, the fuck we can. You see? That's that crutchism. Well, we can't do nothing without massa. We have to have, here's the word I hate, allies. That one sends me straight into fucking surgery. Like to take my gallbladder or something out. Just something. But I have to be rushed into surgery the moment I hear that. We cannot walk alone. That is defeatist talk. Do you understand? That's defeatist. God bless him. God bless him. Again, this is an indictment. This is not an indictment of him. Again, I already prefaced my opening statements by saying that he believed that what he was doing was right at the time that he did it. We can now look and say it was exactly the wrong damn thing. We cannot walk alone, and as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will we be satisfied? That's your modern day, why don't you just get over it? You have a black president. Why don't you just get over it? Why don't you just fucking get over it? Well, this is addressing that. Who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? And he goes on to say, we can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. That question and that answer can be written and answered the same way right now on this day in 2018. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highway and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their adulthood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating "for whites only." This is the shit they don't ever read, you see? Because this indicts their ass. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and the Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulation. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. That's a beautiful line, everybody. Because that still represents our people to this day. Creative suffering. Creative. That's everything from our humor to our own language with each other, to carry on any damn way, to fake change your voice or whatever the fuck you gotta do to be on their goddamn job, or to fake get along with their white ass. You see? The veterans of creative suffering. That's your Christians that are in those misguided churches and so forth. You see? The list is long. Creative suffering. Creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends, even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. You see, we're just now getting to that cadence now. But all of that, they never fucking mention. You see? They never mention that. And many of our people don't know it, sadly. They just begin it. I have a dream. That's it. That's it. When there was all that other knowledge and indictment and acknowledgement of shit and calling out to account, you see, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident. I'm not going to bore you with that because that's the shit everybody knows practically by heart. But as I say, there's 6 pages. And so they leave out the last 2.5. Or they only quote the last 2.5. Well, 2.25. You see? But there's all these other pages that no one ever recites or highlights. Ever. And that's on purpose. Because we know that this enemy is consistent and has never changed. They've always been the type. The moment you call out the truth about them, their hair turns to fire. You see? And their skin turns crimson. The blood shows through their skin. The anger manifesting itself in physiology. Think about that. Contemplate it. Contemplate that. Contemplate that. Now I want to go into the mountaintop speech, because this was the last speech that Dr. King delivered before he was murdered by these white devils. You understand? And let us be clear that James Earl Ray was not the assassinator of fucking Dr. King. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. Just like Oswald never fired a single shot. You see? And I've asked you in previous work that I've done on Dr. King, and some of it related to this very subject matter. I've said, where's Dexter King at, everybody? Where's he at? The one that looks exactly like their father. Like he spit him out and said B. All we get is these pork rind ass looking ass fucking kids that are nothing but coons and sellouts. We're over their fat asses. Where's Dexter at? Let's find that out. We need to find that out. I'm over it. So Dr. King was not going to deliver this speech because the weather was hell that night in Memphis, and they thought that, you know, the people weren't going to really even show up at the church. So he sent Ralph Abernathy and some of the others, Jesse Jackson sellout ass, who I've shown in previous work absolutely had something to do with the assassination. And they got over there and the place was packed. And they called up Dr. King and said, these people are on fire for you over here, Dr. King. They're packed in here. You need to come on over. And so reluctantly he went over, and this was his final speech. This was his final speech, the mountaintop speech. And it's very prophetic, you know, almost eerie. I've said to you that even when he gets to the part where he says, I looked over and I've seen the promised land, I've always been struck by his delivery of that, because there was something divine there. Something divine. Something divine. Something divine. And I think that this night we were looking at a man who was over being afraid. Over it. You know, you can be so afraid at some point. You can be so afraid, and for so long that you can't do it no more. You kind of just give in. and just whatever happens, happens then, whatever. You just don't have the capacity anymore to continue to be jumpy and jittery and all of it. And we know that this white devil was on him round the clock, threatening phone calls and all of it. And I think he was just over it, and he had just given in, and just whatever is going to be, you know? And that was reflected in his words. So this was delivered the 3rd of April 1968 at Mason Temple Church of God in Christ headquarters, I'm over it, in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank you very kindly, my friends. As I listened to Ralph Abernathy and his eloquent and generous introduction, and then thought about myself, I wondered who he was talking about. It's always good to have your closest friend and associate to say something good about you. Notice he didn't say Jesse, everybody. Oh, there was low-key shade being thrown, trust. And Ralph Abernathy is the best friend that I have in the world, period. I'm delighted to see each of you here tonight, in spite of a storm warning. You reveal that you are determined to go on anyhow. Something is happening in Memphis. Something is happening in our world. And you know, if I were standing at the beginning of time, with the possibility of taking a kind of general and panoramic view of the whole of humanity, of human history up to now, and the Almighty said to me, Martin Luther King, which age would you like to live in? I would take my mental flight by Egypt, and I would watch God's children in their magnificent trek from the dark dungeons of Egypt through, or rather across, the Red Sea, through the wilderness on toward the Promised Land. And in spite of its magnificence, I wouldn't stop there. I would move on by Greece and take my mind to Mount Olympus, and I would see Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Euphrates, and Aristophanes assembled around the Parthenon. And I would watch them around the Parthenon as they discussed the great and eternal issue of reality. But I wouldn't stop there. I would go on even to the great heyday of the Roman Empire, and I would see developments around there through various emperors and leaders, but I wouldn't stop there. I would even come up to the day of the Renaissance and get a quick picture of all that the Renaissance did for the culture and aesthetic life of man, but I wouldn't stop there. I would even go by the way that the man for whom I am named had his habitat. And I would watch Martin Luther as he tacked his 95 thesis on the door at the church of Wittenberg. But I wouldn't stop there. I would come on up even to 1863 and watch a vacillating president by the name of Abraham Lincoln finally come to the conclusion that he had to sign the Emancipation Proclamation, but I wouldn't stop there. I would even come up to the early 30s and see a man grappling with the problems of the bankruptcy of the nation, and come with an eloquent cry that we have nothing to fear but fear itself, but I wouldn't stop there. Strangely enough, I would turn to the Almighty and say, if you allow me to live just a few years in the second half of the 20th century, I will be happy. Now that's a strange statement to make because the world is all messed up. The nation is sick. Trouble is the land. Confusion all around. That's a strange statement. But I know somehow that only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. And I see God working in this period of the 20th century in a way that men, in some strange way, are responding. Something is happening in our world. The masses of people are rising up. And wherever they are assembled today, whether they are in Johannesburg, South Africa, Nairobi, Kenya, Accra, Ghana, New York City, Atlanta, Georgia, Jackson, Mississippi, or Memphis, Tennessee, the cry is always the same. We want to be free. And another reason that I'm happy to live in this period is that we have been forced to a point where we are going to have to grapple with the problems that men have been trying to grapple with through history, but the demands didn't force them to do it. Survival demands that we grapple with them. Men for many years now have been talking about war and peace, but now no longer can they just talk about it. It is no longer a choice between violence and non-violence in this world. It's non-violence or non-existence. That is where we are today. And also, in the human rights revolution, if something isn't done and done in a hurry to bring the colored people of the world out of their long years of poverty, their long years of hurt and neglect, the world is doomed. Now, I'm just happy that God has allowed me to live this period to see what is unfolding, and I'm happy that He's allowed me to be in Memphis. I can remember when Negroes were just going around, as Ralph has said so often, scratching where they didn't itch and laughing when they were not tickled. But that day is all over. We mean business now, and we are determined to gain our rightful place in God's world. And that's all this whole thing is, about. We aren't engaged in any negative protest and in any negative arguments with anybody. We're saying that we are determined to be men. We are determined to be people. We are saying that we are God's children, and that we are God's children. We don't have to live like we are forced to live. Now, what does all this mean in this great period of history? It means that we've got to stay together. We've got to sit together and maintain unity. We know whenever Pharaoh wanted to prolong the period of slavery in Egypt, he had a favorite formula for doing it. What was that? He kept the slaves fighting amongst themselves. But whenever the slaves get together, something happens in Pharaoh's court, and he cannot hold the slaves in slavery. When the slaves get together, that's the beginning of getting out of slavery. Now let us maintain unity. Secondly, let us keep the issues where they are. The issue is injustice. The issue is the refusal of Memphis to be fair and honest in its dealing with its public servants, who happen to be sanitation workers. Now we've got to keep attention on that. That's always the problem with a little violence. You know what happened the other day? The press dealt only with the window breaking. I read the articles. They very seldom got around to mentioning the fact that 1,300 sanitation workers are on strike, and that Memphis is not being fair to them, and that Mayor Loeb is in dire need of a doctor. They didn't get around to that. I want to stop and say this. That's the same thing with the I Have a Dream speech. You see? Nope, don't mention that other stuff. Just go to the stuff that makes us feel good in our fucking white devilry. Just that only. Many people don't know that this mountaintop speech shouldn't even be called the mountaintop speech. It should be called the sanitation workers speech, because that's who he was there that night to address. He had gone to Memphis to lead a protest with the sanitation workers, everybody. Do you understand me? You see? You have to put this stuff in context. You have to put it in context. Now we're going to march again, and we've got to march again in order to put the issue where it's supposed to be and force everybody to see that there are 1,300 of God's children here suffering, sometimes going hungry, going through dark and dreary nights, wondering how this thing is going to come out. That's the issue. And we've got to say to the nation, we know how it's coming out. For when people get caught up with that which is right, and they are willing to sacrifice for it, there is no stopping point short of victory. We aren't going to let any mace stop us. We are masters in our nonviolent movement in disarming police forces. They don't know what to do. I've seen them so often. I remember in Birmingham, Alabama, when we were in the majestic struggle there. We would move out of the 16th Street Baptist Church day after day. By the hundreds we would move out. And Bull Connor would tell them to send the dogs forth. And they did come. But we just went before the dogs singing, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round." Bull Connor next would say, "Turn the fire hoses on." And as I said to you the other night, Bull Connor didn't know history. He knew a kind of physics that somehow didn't relate to the transphysics that we knew about. And that was the fact that there was a certain kind of fire that no water could put out. And we went before the fire hoses. And we went before the fire hoses. We had known water. If we were Baptist or some other denomination, we had been immersed. If we were Methodist and some others, we had been sprinkled, but we knew water. That couldn't stop us. And we just went on before the dogs, and we would look at them, and we'd go on before the water hoses, and we would look at it, and we'd go on singing, "Over my head I see freedom in the air." And then we would be thrown in the paddy wagons, and sometimes we were stacked in there like sardines in a can, and they would throw us in, and old Bull would say, "Take 'em off," and they did. And we would go in the paddy wagon singing, "We shall overcome." And every now and then we'd get in jail, and we'd see the jailers looking through the windows, being moved by our prayers and being moved by our words and our songs. And there was a power there which Bull Connor couldn't adjust to. And so we ended up transforming Bull into a steer, and we won our struggle in Birmingham. Now we've got to go to Memphis just like that. I call upon you to be with us when we go out on Monday. Now about the injunction. We have an injunction, and we're going to court tomorrow morning to fight this illegal, unconstitutional injunction. All we say to America is to be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they hadn't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for right. And so just as I say, we aren't going to let dogs or water hoses turn us round. We aren't going to let any injunctions turn us around. We are going on. We need all of you. And you know what's beautiful to me is to see all of these ministers of the gospel. It's a marvelous picture. Who is it that is supposed to articulate the longings and aspirations of people more than the preachers? Somehow the preacher must have a kind of fire shut up in his bones, and whenever injustice is around, he tell it. Somehow the preacher must be an Amos, and saith, when God speaks, whom can but prophesy? Again, with Amos, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Somehow the preacher must say with Jesus, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me, and he has anointed me to deal with the problems of the poor. And I want to commend the preachers under the leadership of these noble men, James Lawson, and who has been in this struggle for many years. One who has been in the struggle for many years. He's been to jail for struggling. He's been kicked out of Vanderbilt University for this struggle. But he's still going on, fighting for the rights of his people. Reverend Ralph Jackson, Billy Kyles. I could just go right on down the list, but the time will not permit, so he didn't name Jesse's fake ass. But I want to thank all of them, and I want to thank them because so often preachers aren't concerned about anything but themselves, and I'm always happy to see a relevant ministry. It's all right to talk about long white robes over yonder in all of its symbolism, but ultimately people want some suits and dresses and shoes to wear down here. It's all right to talk about streets flowing with milk and honey, but God has commanded us to be concerned about the slums down here and his children who can't eat 3 square meals a day. It's all right to talk about the New Jerusalem, but one day God's preacher must talk about New York, the new New York, the new Atlanta, the new Philadelphia, the new Los Angeles, the new Memphis, Tennessee. This is what we have to do. Now the other thing we'll have to do is this. Always anchor our external direct actions with the power of economic withdrawal. Hear that, everybody. Always anchor our external direct action with the power of economic withdrawal. You see, he was talking about economic boycotts. You see, forget all the sit-ins and all of it. You see, oh, he was dangerous. He was dangerous. You see, but they kill anything that is peaceful. Anything. Look how they talked about Obama, the most peaceful man you're ever gonna fucking meet on the planet Earth, besides a prophet from God. And you saw how these white devils talked about him, how they still talk about him. Think about the level of evil that must dwell in the hearts of these people. Think. But the power of economic withdrawal. Now, we are poor people. Individually, we are poor. When you compare us with the white society in America, we are poor. Never stop and forget that collectively, that means all of us together. Collectively, we are richer than all the nations in the world, with the exception of 9. Did you ever think about that? After you leave the United States, Soviet, Russia, Great Britain, West Germany, France, I could name the others. The American Negro collectively is richer than most nations of the world. I told you that. That's still true today, everybody. Collectively, we are the 9th richest fucking nation on the earth. Why are we still asking or depending on this white devil for even so much as a fucking rice grain? Damn. We have an annual income of more than $30 billion a year. Well, we know it's more than that now. We're over $1 trillion. Which is more than all of the exports of the United States and more than the national budget of Canada. Did you know that? That's power right here. That's power right there. If we know how to pool it. You see? Man, oh my God, can you imagine how different things would be, everybody, if they had enacted that then? Not only it would have been effective then, but it would have set a major precedent for us now. To be able to see that that had happened would have made people more eager to do it when we call for the shit today. This slays me. You don't even know. Oh my God. We couldn't even do so much as a fucking bus boycott today. Because of the selfishness of our fucked up ass people. With their petty insignificance. We don't have to argue with anybody. We don't have to curse and go around acting bad with our words. We don't need any bricks and bottles. We don't need any Molotov cocktails. We just need to go around to these stores and to these massive industries in our country and say, God sent us by here to say to you that you're not treating his children right. And we've come by here to ask you to make the first item on your agenda fair treatment when God's children are concerned. Now, if you're not prepared to do that, we do have an agenda that we must follow, and our agenda calls for withdrawing economic support from you. Oh, he had to die. He had to die. You see? And so, as a result of this, we are asking you tonight to go out and tell your neighbors not to buy Coca-Cola in Memphis. Go by and tell them not to buy sealed test milk. Tell them not to buy. What is the other bread? Wonder Bread. And what is the other bread company, Jesse? Tell them not to buy Hart's bread. As Jesse Jackson has said, up to now, only the garbage men have been feeling pain. Now, we must kind of redistribute the pain. We are choosing these companies because they haven't been fair in their hiring policies. And we are choosing them because they can begin the process of saying they are going to support the needs and the rights of these men who are on strike. And then they can move on town. And then they can move on town, downtown, and tell Mayor Loeb to do what is right. But not only that, we've got to strengthen black institutions. I call upon you to take your money out of the banks downtown, bitches, and deposit your money in Tri-State Bank. We want a bank-in movement in Memphis. Go by the Savings and Loan Association. I'm not asking you something that we don't do ourselves at SCLC. Judge Hooks and others will tell you that we have an account here in the Savings and Loan Association from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. We are telling you to follow what we are doing. Put your money there. You have 6 or 7 black insurance companies here in the city of Memphis. Take out your insurance there. We want to have an insurance in. You see what I'm saying? Why, if you are a white fucking person listening to this shit, why does our independence threaten your white ass so much? Answer that shit. Answer that. If you fucking hate us and you don't want us talking about you and telling the truth about you, why does it burn your ass when we want to get the fuck away from you and do our own shit? Answer that, bitch. I'm getting worked up. Now there are some practical things that we can do. We begin the process of building a greater economic base, and at the same time we are putting pressure where it really hurts. I ask you to follow through there. Here's the other thing I want to say, interject and say here, everybody. This is why I say we must empower everybody to lead. That's what the Black Independence Liberation League that I formed seeks to do. Because he said this shit the night before he died. Why didn't their black Christian asses carry through with the shit? You see? Because it's just like how I can have 4 million fucking views on my other channel with 17,000 subscribers, and you can't get 20 fucking people to step up and step forward. I'm with you, Jedi. Let's get it done. What do we got to do? Let's organize. You see? And I understand that. I know that's what Malcolm was dealing with. That's what Martin was dealing with. That's what Medgar was dealing with, and anybody else you're going to want to name. Because they were just like you. They happen to be led and stand around and watch everything, but as soon as that's over, it's over. We have to begin to create movements that don't glorify or focus on an individual. You understand? We don't look for a leader. We look for an organizer who empowers and teaches and grooms other leaders. You understand? So that when the rifle is fired at the Jedi, there's thousands more that are just the fuck like him. And you can't get rid of them. You kill Martin, the shit was over the next day. Done. We've got to learn to read the blueprint that went on before us, everybody. Everything has been laid out for us. Everything. Everything. Now let me say, as I move to my conclusion, that we've got to give ourselves to this struggle until the end. Nothing would be more tragic than to stop at this point in Memphis. Now, see what he just said there? And I just said that the shit was over as soon as he was killed. They didn't follow through with any of this. None of it. None of it. We've got to see this through. And when we have our march, we need to be there. You need to be there. If it means leaving work, if it means leaving school, be there. You see? I always tell you, you got to sacrifice something, everybody. You got to sacrifice. You've got to be willing to sacrifice. Everything, if need be. All of it. Including your life. You have to decide, how bad do you want liberation of our people? How bad do you want it? You see what I'm saying? If it means leaving work, goddammit, do it. If it means leaving school, goddammit, do it. Be there. Be concerned about your brother. You may not be on strike, but either we go up together or we go down together. You see? That's why I always tell you, you got to see your brother as your own. That if you stand against one of us, you stood against all of us. So that maybe police brutality and people being shot down every week isn't happening right where you live, but goddammit, you got to act as if you were fucking nicked by the bullet too. And anything else that goes on in this fake ass society, this asshole of the devil. Let us develop a kind of dangerous unselfishness, huh? One day a man came to Jesus and he wanted to raise some questions about some vital matters of life. At points, he wanted to trick Jesus and show him that he knew a little more than Jesus knew and throw him off base. Now that question could have easily ended up in a philosophical and theological debate. But Jesus immediately pulled the question from midair and placed it on a dangerous curve between Jerusalem and Jericho. And he talked about a certain man who fell among thieves. You remember a Levite and a priest passed by on the other side. They didn't stop to help him. And finally a man of another race came by. He got down from his beast, decided not to be compassionate by proxy. But he got down with him and administered first aid and helped the man in need. Jesus ended up saying, "This was the good man. This was the great man. because he had the capacity to protect the I into the thou and to be concerned about his brother. Now, you know, we use our imagination a great deal to try to determine why the priest and the Levite didn't stop. At times we say they were busy going to a church meeting or ex, es, associate, what the fuck is this word? Ex, ex, oh, an ecclesiastical gathering, and they had to get on down to Jerusalem so they wouldn't be late for their meeting. At other times, we would speculate that there was a religious law that one who was engaged in religious ceremonies was not to touch a human body 24 hours before the ceremony. And every now and then we begin to wonder whether maybe they weren't, whether they were not going down to Jerusalem or down to Jericho, rather to organize a Jericho Road Improvement Association. That's a possibility. Maybe they felt that it was a better deal, that it was better to deal with the problem from the casual route rather than to get bogged down with an individual effect. But I'm going to tell you what my imagination tells me. It's possible that these men were afraid. You see, the Jericho Road is a dangerous road. I remember when Mrs. King and I were first in Jerusalem. We rented a car and drove from Jerusalem to Jericho. And as soon as we got on that road, I said to my wife, I can see why Jesus used this as the setting for his parable. It's winding, meandering road. It's a winding, meandering road. It's really conducive for ambushing. You start out in Jerusalem, which is about 1,200 miles, or rather 1,200 feet above sea level. And by the time you get down to Jericho, 15 or 20 minutes later, you're about 2,200 feet below sea level. That's a dangerous road. In the days of Jesus, it came to be known as the Bloody Pass. And you know, it's possible that the priest and the Levite looked over that man on the ground and wondered if the robbers were still around. Or it's possible that they felt that the man on the ground was merely faking, and he was acting like he had been robbed and hurt in order to seize them over there, lure them there for quick and easy seizure. And so the first question that the priest asked, the first question that the Levite asked was, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? But then the Good Samaritan came by, and he reversed the question. If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? That's the question before you tonight. Not if I stop to help the sanitation worker, what will happen to my job? Not if I stop to help the sanitation worker, what will happen to all the hours that I usually spend in my office every day and every week as a pastor? The question is not if I stop to help this man in need, what will happen to me? The question is, if I do not stop to help the sanitation worker, what will happen to them? That's the question. Let us rise up tonight with a greater readiness. Let us stand with a greater determination, and let us move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge to America, these days of challenge to make America what it ought to be. We have an opportunity to make America a better nation, and I want to thank God once more for allowing me to be here with you. You know, several years ago, I was in New York City autographing the first book that I had written. And while sitting there autographing books, a demented black woman came up. The only question I heard from her was, "Are you Martin Luther King?" And I was looking down writing, and I said yes, and the next minute I felt something beating on my chest. Before I knew it, I had been stabbed by this demented woman. I was rushed to the Harlem hospital. It was a dark Sunday afternoon, and that blade had gone through, and the x-rays revealed that the tip of the blade was on the edge of the aorta, the main artery. And once that's punctured, you're drowned in your own blood. That's the end of you. It came out in the New York Times the next morning that if I had merely sneezed, I would have died. Well, about 4 days later, they allowed me, after the operation, after my chest had been open and the blade had been taken out, to move around in the wheelchair in the hospital. They allowed me to read some of the mail that came in, and from all over the states and the world, kind letters came in. I read a few, but one of them I will never forget. I had received one of them from the president and the vice president. I've forgotten what those telegrams said. I'd received a visit and a letter from the governor of New York, but I've forgotten what that letter said. But there was another letter that came from a little girl, a young girl, who was a student at the White Plains High School. And I looked at that letter, and I'll never forget it. It said simply, "Dr. King, I am a 9th grade student at the White Plains High School." And she said, while it should not matter, I would like to mention that I'm a white girl. I read in the paper of your misfortune and of your suffering, and I read that if you had sneezed, you would have died, and I'm simply writing you to say that I'm so happy you didn't sneeze. And I want to say tonight that I too am happy that I didn't sneeze. Because if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here. I wouldn't have been around here in 1960, when students all over the South started sitting in at lunch counters. And I knew that as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best in the American dream and taking the whole nation back to those great wells of democracy which were dug deeply by the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1961 when we decided to take a ride for freedom and ended segregation in interstate travel. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1962 when Negroes in Albany, Georgia decided to straighten their backs up, and whenever men and women straighten their backs up, they're going somewhere, because a man can't ride your back unless it's bent. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been here in 1963 when the black people in Birmingham, Alabama aroused the conscience of this nation and brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have had a chance later that year in August to try to tell America about a dream that I had had. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been down in Selma, Alabama to see the great movement there. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been in Memphis to see the community rally around those brothers and sisters who were suffering. I'm so happy I didn't sneeze. And they were telling me, now it doesn't matter now. And they were telling me now, it doesn't matter now. It really doesn't matter what happens now. I left Atlanta this morning, and as we got started on the plane, there were 6 of us. The pilot said over the public address system, "We're sorry for the delay, but we have Dr. Martin Luther King on the plane, and to be sure that all of the bags were checked, and to be sure that nothing would be wrong with on the plane, we had to check out everything carefully. And we've had the plane protected and guarded all night." And then I got into Memphis, and some began to say the threats, or talk about the threats that were out. What would happen to me from some of our sick white brothers? Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. And I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He has allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, But I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And so I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And then he was too full and he had to just leave the stage. But this is all important, everybody. The nuance of these speeches. You see, your children should know this. They have to know this. Because otherwise they're being sold this idea that he was just here to get white people and black people to just come together and just that kumbaya bullshit, and fuck that. You understand? But you have to also give them this, but you also have to educate them about these people being the absolute enemy of our people, period, the damn end. And they don't just willy-nilly take any of them for friends, lovers, or fucking confidence at fucking all. Do you understand me? They should also know the lyrics to Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday song. You see? There was more nuance. And they should know and read the letter from a Birmingham jail. Don't give me this I have a dream bullshit the last fucking page and a half. I'm over that. If I even hear that anymore, I will probably vomit myself to death. Because it doesn't begin to even scratch what was being said. Even the mountaintop speech, very prophetic and all of that. But you saw the nuance and you saw the crux of what he was doing. He was calling his people to put down everything and say, we gotta fucking help these sanitation workers. That means if you can't get to your job and if you can't get to school, we won't give a damn. Bring your shit. And he was telling our people, take your money out of the fucking banks. Don't do business with the white devil. Take your insurance to black fucking insurers. Don't do business with any of these stores and shit. Oh, it was getting ugly. You see? But you're still dealing with those same people today. Yesterday is today and today is yesterday, and now shit has changed and this white devil is still the fucking same. They don't change, they just fucking regenerate. They just regenerate. That's all. They just regenerate. That's it. That's why their kids come to school and fuck with your kids when your kids haven't done a fucking thing to them. Because remember, evil is their lifeblood. It just is. We have to call a thing, and without apology. You understand? Without apology. There's a lot more I could say, but like I said, I'm going to do 3 parts. This is the longest of them, I promise you, because I don't have any way to shorten these articles or these speeches. Everybody, they need to be given their proper respect. The other videos, the other 2 parts that I'm going to do, they will be shorter than this, and I'll probably be on camera for those as well. So I always tell you, your time is valuable, and so is mine. So I never take up any more of your time than I think is necessary, and I don't waste your time or mine. So in keeping with that spirit, I'm going to land the video here, and then I will see you in the subsequent 2 parts that I will come with after this. I'll see you soon. This is the Jedi.